Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. I see the attendee number growing, so we are just going to give it a few minutes to allow people to join as it gradually goes up. Just want to confirm that everybody can see the screen that's being shared. Okay. So we have someone who has indicated that they can see the screen. Excellent, thank you. That's always a great sign. Okay. Perfect, great. Starting out strong. Okay, so again, let's start going since we probably have a majority of the people who have registered to participate on the line. So hello again, good morning, afternoon, or evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the first session in our Operation Clean Sweep webinar series. Before we get started, I would like to cover a few items. First, last week, 2 hurricanes made landfall on the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coasts. While there were minimal impacts to facilities, we recognize that there are power outages that may have affected employees and their families. Our thoughts are with them and we wish them all well. On a happier note, this webinar series and its topics have attracted great interest with over 300 registrations from over 26 countries. And that's great because the concepts of pellet, flake, and powder control are universal and should be shared widely. On this note, each of the 3 sessions will be recorded. While the slides and videos will be available on our website, to access those recordings in advance of the last webinar of the series, you can complete a short survey. It's honestly 3 very short questions, and it helps us to calibrate and improve throughout the month, just to make sure that we are answering the questions you have and that we are making sure that everything is working. All of the attendees' lines are currently muted. We will offer a Q&A session after all of the speakers present all of their slides. Please feel free to send in your questions using the question box feature of Zoom webinar at any point during the program, and avoid using the chat function. We will collect questions throughout and do a single Q&A session at the end. And as a courtesy, we would like to remind you that this is a public session and press and other non-member participants are welcome and may be present. In addition, please keep in mind that we will abide by antitrust rules and refrain from discussing pricing, production, or marketing strategies, anything that could be construed as market manipulation. We will not address any of these questions of this nature during this meeting. I'd also like to take some time at the start to introduce our speakers for today, listed in order of appearance. And I'll also take this, let's see. So my name is Patrick Krieger, and I am the Director of Sustainability and Materials with the Plastics Industry Association. As I'm also acting as the moderator for this series, I'm going to be modest and skip most of my biography. I'll just say that I have worked at plastics for over 5 years, and I'm responsible for our activities related to marine debris, including managing Operation Clean Sweep. Stu Harris is the Senior Director of Marine Environmental Stewardship with ACC's Plastics Division. In addition to helping me run OCS, Stu is responsible for developing and implementing ACC's global and domestic marine debris policy. In addition, he is chair of the plastic industry's global action team, which implements the Declaration of the Global Plastics Associations for Solutions on Marine Litter. He is a Master of Science degree in Marine Estuarine Environmental Science from the University of Maryland and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Bucknell University. David Sandidge has over 30 years of experience in the chemicals and plastics industries, improving in the performance in manufacturing, quality, supply chain, EHS, and sustainability from plant, corporate, and trade association perspectives. He is a recognized expert in the development, implementation, operation, leadership, assessment, auditing, and improvement of EHS organizations and their systems. David has BS and MS degrees in Industrial and Systems Engineering from the University of Tennessee and an MBA from Auburn University. He is a licensed professional engineer and certified quality engineer. He's a lead auditor and has successfully implemented a variety of management systems, including RCMSR, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, process safety management, and many more. Between the three of us, we're going to cover 4 topics today. I'm going to give an overview of the series and how you can help us make it as useful as possible now for the month of September, but also moving forward. I'll also go over the basics of Operation Clean Sweep. Stu will then give an overview of OCS Blue, highlighting what makes it different than OCS. And finally, David will share some of his experience on how to get started implementing an OCS program and performing your first gap analysis. As I've mentioned, this is the first in a 3-part series. If you haven't registered for numbers 2 and 3, I encourage you to do so, as well as encouraging your colleagues to participate. Registration is already open, so you should have no problem doing that. These sessions are all intended to be collaborative, and we have some great speakers, and they will also be acting as facilitators, because not only are they going to be sharing their own experiences and company practices, but we also want to listen to what you're doing as well. No one company has all the answers, so we want to hear what issues you're struggling with and about solutions you may have instituted. To that end, we will include surveys between the first and second session that we will be sending out to everybody who is registered. These 2 surveys will be slightly different, but each will ask you if you have any specific questions about the upcoming topic. It will also have space for you to share what your company is doing. We want to collect these questions in advance because we know that these sessions are only an hour long, and that gives our speakers the ability to ensure that they answer as many questions as possible during their presentations. And because everyone's operations are different, by collecting as many industry practices or solutions or procedures as possible, we can build a robust resource that we can then share with everyone that'll be more relevant to more companies. And so following that 3rd webinar, we're going to compile all the industry practices and resources that we have gathered into a single document and share it with you all. All of those comments will be handled anonymously unless you state otherwise. So what is Operation Clean Sweep? What is this? So Operation Clean Sweep was actually developed in 1991 by Plastics, which was then called SPI. And ACC joined as a partner in running this program in 2004. And simply put, the objective of the program is to reduce to 0 the amount of plastic pellets, flakes, or powder lost during manufacture or transport. And we say 0 intentionally because that's what we mean. The goal is to drive to 0. When registering, we asked if your company was a member of OCS, and about 31% of you either answered no or that you were unsure. So for those of you who are here, who are curious about the program and maybe why you want to join, I have 4 simple reasons. First, it's efficient. Plastic that is spilled or unrecovered can't be sold. So control ensures that it stays a valuable product instead of waste. Second, it's safer. Pellets in particular can lead to falls, and those accidents can mean lost work time, higher worker compensation costs, and lower employee morale. 3, it's the law. Many states have stormwater regulations. For example, in California, one can be fined $3,000 per incident, and a person found discharging unauthorized waste could be found guilty of a misdemeanor and fined up to $1,000 a day. And that's just at the state level. We also recognize that internationally there are additional regulations that are important. And 4, it's good for the environment. I don't have to tell you, a member of the plastics industry, about the potential hazards of plastics that make their way into the marine environment. We hear about those all of the time. And so in addition to making sure that these are out of the environment, these programs really help, these stewardship programs really help in improving relationships with stakeholder or other community organizations and help show that you're trying to meet commitments to minimize and improve your environmental footprint. And by joining, you'd be in good company. Operation Clean Sweep has over 500 companies in their locations as partner members. We also have 24 supporting members, and 26 OCS Blue members. And we'll talk a little bit more about each one of those in a second. The other thing that's interesting to me is that those numbers are growing significantly. Plastics receives on average 2 to 3 new pledges a week. So you may be sitting here asking, where do I qualify? Where do I sit in on these various member types? Now remember, when we're talking about OCS as run by Plastics and ACC, this is a program that is in the United States and Canada. So a lot of these things are specific to there. If you are a company that comes into direct contact with plastic pellets, flakes, or powders, you can be a partner member. That includes producers, logistics companies, warehousing, storage, and processors. And this isn't limited to virgin plastic only. Recyclers and those handling PCR can participate too as partner members. But what if you don't have direct contact, but you support the principles of the program? Well, in that case, you can be a supporter. And that includes trade associations, NGOs, and other businesses in the supply chain. We have several examples of all three of those. We don't really go into great detail about how a supporting member can support the program within this presentation, but my contact information will be shared at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to reach out and we can talk a little bit more about how you do that. And then OCS Blue, again, I don't want to steal Stu's thunder, so I'll just say that he'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. I also mentioned that this is the United States, or in Canada. But if you're one of those people from the 26 other countries that have registered, there's a pretty good chance that the odds are good that you will be able to participate in a program as well in your country, as we have 27 other organizations that have programs implemented internationally. We call these our international licensees or international program partners. And if you look at this list and you see that your country doesn't have one, please feel free to encourage your local plastics trade associations to consider becoming one of our program international partners. This is a really important tool on how we can further spread the education and awareness of pellet, flake, and powder control. And participation is pretty simple. I'm not going to say easy, but it's simple. And I'm only really going to discuss these at a high level because I know that David is going to talk in more detail in a minute about the practical steps of getting started. But so when people ask me, how do I join OCS? It's a very simple 5-step process. First, a company must sign the OCS pledge committing to the next 4 steps. This commitment is facility by facility, so a company can start with 1 or 2 and slowly grow their program. That pledge can be found on our website. Again, the URL of that will be shared at the end of this presentation. Second, a company must assess their current situation and identify any gaps. Again, David will talk a little bit more about gap assessments in a moment. Third, you need to make the necessary upgrades in the facilities, equipment, and procedures as appropriate and when feasible. Fourth, educate your employees about how important they are in preventing accidents and cleaning them up when they occur. And fifth, finally, recognize that this is a process and that you need to be vigilant to ensure that you're making continual progress and improvements. I think when people see this list, companies are most often scared by the second and third points. Often people think that they have to wait to join the program until their procedures are perfect. That's not really feasible, nor is it an expectation of the program. And people also tend to think that if they perform the analysis, they will identify all these areas for improvement and then they'll be overwhelmed. Rome wasn't built in a day. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't think that you have to solve all of the problems on day one. Start with one area or one piece of equipment or one gap that you've identified. Maybe take one thing that you've learned from this series and implement that. So I have actually been talking for a little bit, and I'm going to hand this off to Stu so that Stu can join. Actually, I see that he is having trouble joining, so I will handle this for him until he is able to jump in. But okay. So what is OCS Blue? So OCS Blue is an evolution of the program. It started in 2017, and it was created in a response to companies who had already implemented OCS and wanted to make a stronger commitment to zero pellet, flake, and powder loss. OCS Blue has 3 additional requirements. First, obviously, the company must apply and agree to the next added steps. Remember that the program is run by ACC and Plastics in North America. So for OCS Blue, all US and Canadian locations need to be implementing the steps of OCS. That means that those companies must meet the prior requirements that we already referenced, which are periodic audits, inspections, employee education, and continual process improvement. The companies recognize that their leadership to zero pellet, flake, and powder loss is important, and that they need to share what they're doing to accomplish that, as well as to educate their supply chain partners about OCS and the principles. One of the great ways for you to share about your best practices or how you're controlling for these things is to respond to the surveys that I mentioned previously. And finally, they also agree to share information with OCS annually on unrecovered pellet, flake, and powder spills. And we can go into some detail about that. Again, this is intended to be a high-level discussion, but if we have time at the end, we can talk a little bit more about that. And in fact, ACC as an organization feels so strongly that OCS Blue is an important next step in the program that the members of the ACC Plastics Division agreed that joining OCS Blue is a requirement for membership. And at this point, I don't see that Stu has been able to join, and that's okay. What I will do at this point is I will hand it off to David, and David will be able to unmute himself while I'm doing that and begin his slides. David, you should have control.
Okay, can you hear me, Patrick?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So, let me just, so how do I advance this?
You should be able to press the right key.
No.
Okay. Well, that's okay. That may not be working. So why don't you just tell me and I will advance your slides for you.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so getting started in OCS, and what we're going to talk about here is really just what that slide says, how to get started with really a bias for action. It doesn't have to be perfect, as Patrick has alluded to, but we want to begin implementing and then continually improve your system. So that's our mindset here in Operation Clean Sweep. So let's go to the next slide. So just to recap, OCS is an international program designed to prevent pellet, flake, and powder loss to the environment. It has an aspirational goal, and that's to have 0 losses of pellet, flake, and powder. The focus of the initiative is on resin manufacture, transportation, and conversion into plastic products. Each segment of the industry has a role to play, be that resin producers, transporters, bulk terminals, or processors. It's good for the environment and good for business. Less lost pellets affect the environment, but they also affect cost. So it's something that has double dividends, so to speak. Okay, next slide. The information that I'm going to be highlighting here is available on the opcleansweep.org website. So there is a program manual, which is about a 30-page document, and it outlines kind of the key elements of OCS. It provides you information on introducing the program, how to kind of set up your workplace, key steps for training employees. It gives you some helpful hints on prevention, containment, and cleanup practices. It also provides a variety of checklists at the end of the document, which just are really thought starters for you to use in developing your own specific checklists for different operations. Okay, next. So it's important to have someone serve in the role of a champion of the program at the company. So we're not saying it has to have a certain level of person, but it does need to have a management priority. So first of all, you do need someone in your executive structure at an appropriate level that can make and support the company commitment to OCS. There is a signature to make that commitment, and so that needs to be someone at a high enough level that it will signify support from the company. The champion needs to be able to establish priorities and focus. Sometimes that'll stay at the executive level. Sometimes that'll go into a particular functional area like environmental or perhaps sustainability. But there needs to be someone that can establish some of the operating priorities and focus as you work to implement the program. The champion needs to be able to develop an organizational vision and enlist staff and employees to share and work toward that vision. So they don't need a huge department, but they need to be able to develop that vision and enlist support to work towards it. Working with the right people, the champion will need to be able to direct resources and personnel towards support of your goals and objectives, and really support integrating OCS into your company culture and business strategy and business calendar. So a key role for this, management support, and then identification of someone to be a program champion for the initiative. So that's one of the important early steps in implementing OCS is to identify these champions. Okay, next step, or slide, excuse me. So how do you go about doing this? Once you make the commitment, I think the first step is to learn what OCS is. And that's the purpose of some of these webinars. Today's webinar is more of an introduction. The next two webinars will provide, I think, some really good concrete examples of how companies have developed some good practices in different areas of Operation Clean Sweep. You need to assess where your company stands and what it needs. So what is your company's situation? Some things you may do is you may make necessary upgrades to facilities and equipment. You will want to raise employee awareness and create accountability, and then follow up and enforce what procedures you have. So these are steps that are outlined in the OCS manual. And again, they provide just a kind of a high-level outline of things to consider as you develop a customized plan that'll work for your company. Okay? Next slide. You know, if you look at the value chain here, there are a lot of places where we can make an impact. This flow chart is meant to be a generic flow of pellets and material, resin, as it goes from production through loading and various process feeding steps, storage, recycling and returns, packaging in different ways, and transporting in different ways. So there are a lot of places in this value chain where prevention, containment, and cleanup can apply. And so it's important, no matter where you fit in this, you do have a role to play to help us move towards our goal of zero pellet loss. Okay. Next step, slide. So one example of prevention, containment, and cleanup, not just in resin production, but it includes transportation and packaging, spills and packaging, transportation vehicles, marine transport, waste recycling and disposal, and dust and powder. Again, this is mentioned in the OCS manual. So there are several places that you can focus on in the value chain after manufacturing of the resin. Next slide. How do you integrate OCS with your management system? Many of you have a management system already. You may be doing RCMS or RC 14001. You may be doing ISO 14001. You may be doing SQS. There may be a variety of things that you do. There are many options for audited management systems. And you can see some of those there. Even moving into supply chain, customer specific, sustainability, forestry, all different options. Whether you have those management systems that include third-party audits or not, you have a management system. So just because you say, well, I don't get audited, well, that doesn't mean you don't have a management system, because a management system is really the procedures, practices, and the way you do business. It can be formal or informal. It can be rigorously documented, or it can be a little bit more word of mouth. But if you're getting things done, and you are, you have a management system. Whether you've advanced it to where it has a third-party audit or not, that will vary. So there's many options for audited systems, but whether you audit or not, you have a system. So implementing practices associated with OCS will occur within your system in some type of a system or procedural manner, and you're going to incorporate that into what works for you. If you do have a third-party audited management system, you may be able to incorporate OCS requirements into your existing system. For example, ISO 14001 or RCMS or RC 14001. Because most of those third-party management system technical specifications have a section where there's language around, some language along the lines of other commitments to which the organization subscribes. So you could make the commitment, for example, to incorporate OCS commitments into your Responsible Care 14001 audit. That's really up to you to define that and make that part of your system, which then makes it something that can be audited as part of your third-party audit. Now, one of the things OCS is doing currently is working towards a more definitive approach for how OCS partners can really verify their practices. So there's a spectrum, as we've kind of noted earlier in this slide, of engagement with management systems, all the way from kind of informal, maybe word of mouth, to some procedures and practices, to a rigorous third-party audited system. There's a continuum. And so what we want to do is work towards kind of a broad approach to how we can verify practices. And this can incorporate efficiencies with what you're already doing. We want to offer right-sized flexibility for all of our members. And we want to promote growth in the program and advancement of companies that are interested in OCS to go to the OCS Blue level. So we are currently working on this, and we certainly appreciate all ideas and options and understanding of what different approaches to verification may be out there. But that is an active project of the OCS group. Next slide. In terms of getting started with the initiative, this goes into a little bit more detail than some of the more generic material at the beginning of the manual. The first thing you really have to do is you really have to understand OCS principles and commitments. So educate yourself on what you're committing to. And also understand that the aspirational goal is zero loss. Pellets, flake, powder, whatever form it is that you handle, we want to make aspirationally a commitment to zero loss. You need to identify your leadership team champion, who can serve as that champion in your company. You need to become familiar with the OCS manual that we've referenced here, and what are some of the available supporting resources. You need to communicate your company's commitment to OCS throughout your organization. That's at an awareness level and at a commitment level. We also would encourage you to conduct just an internal gap analysis, kind of an internal audit of the relevant processes that you have at both corporate and at sites. And maybe you start with, a single site, but you understand kind of where you really are. One of the principles of Operation Clean Sweep is that members really encourage participation in the initiative with your value chain partners. We're seeing more and more of that, and we hope that we can build on that positive trend. This work will result in good ideas for doing things. And so therefore, it will require resources. So you will have to prioritize improvements in your procedures, organization, and equipment, and resource them. So it will require resourcing of the initiative. And then we would encourage you to, whatever's the right sized solution for you, that you incorporate your OCS related activities into your company's management system. So don't let it become a one-off program, but weave it into the way you do business as part of your management system. Next step. Now, we've talked some about how to get started and how to integrate OCS with some of the things you're doing and building on those good practices. What we'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about conducting this initial gap analysis that we referred to. So what you want to do is you want to understand your current state. So this is an internal process you go through. You want to be thorough, ask hard questions, look for evidence, ensure that responsibility is defined and is accepted by those where it's defined. Don't get overwhelmed with your gaps. And again, remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're driving performance in terms of a continual improvement mode towards this goal of zero loss. Next slide. And this is an example of just what a gap analysis kind of looks like. So here are 3 different elements that you might have. You then identify the requirement, and here's an example. We're doing a gap analysis here of Acme Plastics. So first off, on policy, is there a commitment to OCS? Has the pledge been signed? And so for Acme, they did, and you can see that. Senior management, it was occurring. Activity was actually occurring. Again, verify that, because it may just be down on paper and not occurring. And then is there a system that documents that? Can we find those documented policies and pledges? Yes, and so there's no gap. You go on down into another area. This is a system for cleaning up spills. This is in the material handling station there at Acme. Is there housekeeping equipment readily available in the loading area to respond to spills? This is out of the OCS manual. Responsibility, material and loading manager. There is no equipment available and there's no procedure. So there's a gap. And then your last example, containment systems. Do you have storm drains in the loading area? Do those have screens or other containment devices? You do a storm drain inspection every month. Have been doing that, maybe as part of your permit. So you're unloading managers. So the activity is occurring. Yeah, but there really weren't. You say you do a monthly inspection, so there's no monthly. You couldn't find monthly checklist for the last 4 months on the southeast loading station. So there's an example. So to have a gap, you either don't have the activity occurring when you say you have it, or you maybe don't have it documented. And you can be as rigorous with this as you want as far as the documentation question goes. You can see that this tabular format, which often companies will actually execute using a spreadsheet, has a lot of flexibility in developing something that helps give you a template for the things that you want to examine. So the next slide talks a little bit more about these two types of gaps. Generally, the system doesn't meet the need, is the first type. So go to the OCS manual, industry good practices, and compare what you're currently doing to that. Okay. And then you may have all of that checked off that's applicable to you. But then the practice, the second type of gap can be the practice doesn't meet what your system says. So your procedures and things may say a certain level of activity, but they're simply not being executed. So that's a second kind of gap. And the solutions around those can be different. Again, continual improvement towards zero losses. That's what we're trying to work towards. Okay. So, how to get started on the gap analysis. I always like to encourage folks to start with the end in mind. So develop you an internal kind of target date that you want to have it done by. A good practice, not a requirement, but a good practice is to complete your initial gap analysis for corporate and an example site within 6 months of joining. That's a suggestion, not a requirement. Review your manual and other resources to identify the applicable good practices and ideas that you want to include on your checklist and your gap analysis template. Develop your spreadsheet format, and we'll be developing some additional more detailed more realistic templates. And in fact, the companies out there on the phone may very well have examples that they could share and may already have this kind of thing developed. But develop one that works for you. Then conduct this using your internal audit group. That's probably the best way to start because they're used to dealing with these kinds of things, and that's a good place to get an initial first look. Review your gaps with management, prioritize those for closure. And in the activities that you're going to do to reconcile the gaps, you want to be sure to assign owners and responsibilities for those and to track progress on a periodic basis. And then, again, incorporate this into whatever mechanism you use to manage your environmental management system. So that's just a few thoughts on how to get started with OCS and how to get started doing a gap analysis around OCS. So next slide. Excuse me. And I think we're actually going to take questions at the end. So.
Yep. Thanks, David and Stu. We've reached that part of our program where we have time for questions, and we have about 20 minutes, which is what we had planned. So everything is going according to plan. We do have a lot of questions. We may not get to everything, but rest assured, if you didn't post your question anonymously, we can follow up with you afterwards. Please feel free to continue during this time to add additional questions to our Q&A queue, and we'll go through these. So also, I think David's is here. Let me just double check. But yeah, so we will make sure that you all have our additional contact information in the follow-up email that will be going out. So let me just take one moment, and Stu and David, if you both could undo I'll move this over here, your lines. All right, so let's start with, Stu probably can answer this question. We have locations in Germany and in the United States. Do we need to join multiple programs?
Thanks, Patrick. And this is Stu Harris. Good afternoon or good morning to everyone. The short answer is yes. At this point, OCS is a franchised, if you will, model where there are different programs either by country or by region, depending on where you are. As I believe we went over at the beginning, OCS was started by Plastics. A few years later, ACC joined to help co-manage the program. And then licenses are granted to associations in other regions or countries to operate OCS programs in that area with some differences based on their own regional circumstances. So short answer is yes, you would need to sign up for OCS and OCS Blue through ACC and Plastics in the US, and then in Germany through Plastics Europe.
Also, while you were doing that, someone requested that we add the links to the chat, which is a great idea. So I am going to I just added to the chat the link to Operation Clean Sweep, our main page, and then also a link to the manual itself. So those are two pretty easy ways to get those if you don't want to wait for a response. All right, so the next question that we have is your map doesn't show that there's a program in my country. Can I join the Plastics ACC program? Would you like to handle that one too?
I'm happy to handle that one. The short answer is no. You can't. The OCS program that Plastics and ACC manage in the US is really focused on companies with a footprint in the United States. You can certainly utilize resources, the manual and things like that to improve your own best practices. But what you should do is work with your local or regional trade association, either in the country or the region. And we can work with you to help make those connections and to provide some support to that local or regional association to help them become a licensee for Operation Clean Sweep. Patrick and I have done that with a number of other associations, especially recently as we're trying to expand the global coverage of OCS. But short answer is, unfortunately, no, the OCS program in the US is for US based facilities.
So so here's a few additional ones. How much does it cost to join? Yes, we didn't mention that in this program. The program is free. There is no cost to join, so great value there. The next question is, when we join, how long until we have to have all of our locations joined to OCS? We have 7 locations. So we don't actually have a requirement for a deadline. It's not like once your first one joins, you have to have all of them done within a year or 3 years. It falls into that kind of concept that we had identified as point 4, which is that continual progress and continual improvement. So continue to make improvement, which may also include adding additional facilities and locations to your OCS membership. So here is a question that is, do you know why there is not an OCS Blue in Europe? Stu, would you like to handle that one?
Sure, and it's funny, I think we're thinking at the same time. I just typed an answer to that. The short answer is that Plastics Europe is focused right now on creating minimum requirements in response to pressure from the Commission, and so has been focused on that pathway. Patrick and myself are in communication regularly with our colleagues at Plastics Europe, also colleagues in other areas like the Gulf and Asia regarding, and Canada, regarding OCS Blue, as well as other measures that associations are taking in their region to help improve the robustness of the OCS program. We do anticipate that at some point Plastics Europe will adopt or offer OCS Blue or something similar to its membership. But again, their more immediate need is to address the Commission's request that they create minimum requirements for Operation Clean Sweep.
Okay, thanks, Stu. So we have a lot of questions in the queue around the gap analysis and the gap analysis form, whether we are able to share that one, and if there's an example out there that people can use. So, David, I'm not sure if you have an answer to that, but I think that we can respond.
Sure. Here's my understanding of where we are. There is not a section in that manual around gap analysis. So the OCS manual does not have that. Of course, we talked about some of the principles today. And one of the things we're doing is we're gathering examples of good practices around gap analysis and some of the templates and things that other companies may be doing. We're in the process of doing that now. If you have something you'd like to share, please send me an email. And then I suspect we'll take that and then develop an example template, more detailed template that we would make available, on the OCS website for companies to use to get started. But there is not one in the manual at this time, but it's something we're working on.
Thanks, David. Yep. So remember, everyone, that I'll be sending a survey to everyone after this, and you should be able to feel free to share any additional resources in that you have that you would like to be included in the compiled document. So the next question we have is, what method can we use to estimate the amount of pellet loss that could not be recovered? Unless one of my colleagues would like to answer this, I can take a stab at this. Okay, great. So what I would say to that is that there's no one accepted procedure. It's definitely something that, because of OCS Blue and the reporting requirements, we have received a lot of questions about. And so it's something that we are discussing with our members, essentially the members of OCS Blue, on what makes a reasonable method or approach. And when we have that information, again, much like with the gap analysis, we'll make sure to share that information kind of collectively to the group. Another question related to this, is there a guideline available to calculate spills, or what constitutes a spill for OCS? So yes, there is. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we do have essentially a minimum threshold for what's considered to be a spill. And you can find that on our website. Someone commented as a great example of an approach. So we collect scrap bins and weigh them, and then we subtract net weights from theoretical weights. So that is one great approach. Okay, so the next question is where are the checklists that were mentioned? So the checklists can be found on our website. They can be found in the manual. And if you're having trouble with those, please feel free to contact me and I can share those and all of the other materials with you as well. David, I have a few questions about auditing.
Okay.
Does the audit need to be done by a third
party? I do not think so. If you're talking about your initial gap analysis, no, it does not. If you're talking about your company chooses to do third-party audits, then you can weave OCS into an existing management system in the context of other obligations. There is no ANAB approved technical specification around OCS. Maybe in the future, but as of right now, there is not such a thing in the ISO world. So I would encourage companies to do the initial gap analysis, which is different, with their own internal audit function. And then if they want to incorporate it into a third-party audit, then incorporate it by including it as part of the other requirements that you've committed to.
So I think we have two questions that are similar, so I'm going to try to combine them on the fly. So what are some examples of management or auditing system tools? I know that you mentioned a spreadsheet. Are there other kinds of tools or resources on how to do these audits?
Hang on just a second.
While you're answering that one, we're going to go to another question and we'll loop back around. So we have members.
Sorry.
Additional location. So that's really easy to do. Again, you can email me and I can add it that way. There's also a form on our website and you can use that to update the number of locations that you have. Also, I will mention right now, because that reminds me that as a member of OCS, you need to renew your promise every 3 years. And that is also a really great time to just double check to make sure that all of the facilities that you have listed either on our website or any information that we share with you is something that is accurate. We are right now currently in that renewal program. You've been able to receive that. But if you have joined recently, obviously your clock is restarting. So how can our Canadian sites register for OCS Blue? Can they use the US website or is there a separate site? Stu, would you like to address OCS in Canada?
Yes, Patrick, thank you. And I think this may have been also addressed in the Q&A. CIAC is the lead for OCS in Canada. They're in the process of updating or setting up their site and registration. And so we will have the ability, or member companies who have facilities in Canada will have the ability to join OCS Blue at some point in the near future. But that is not yet established today. So we can follow up offline if you have more specific questions, but that should be coming. Also, I'm just skimming through the questions real quickly, Patrick, since I have the floor. There was a question about an OCS partner in Saudi Arabia. And Patrick and I recently worked with GPCA, the Gulf Petrochemical and Chemicals Association, who is the OCS license holder for the Gulf region. So we can provide some specific contact information if you would like for the Gulf region.
And Patrick, I finally figured out how to turn my phone off. So back to the question on audits. I think, are there other resources? Yes, there are. You can go to identify various audit checklists from a variety of places. Or one would be the checklists that are in the manual. Also, as I mentioned, we'll be coming out with some guidance with a more detailed gap analysis spreadsheet. And you can also, at a high level, go to an ISO document, say the ISO 14001 environmental management system. You could look at that and to get some idea of questions that might be applicable for pellet loss.
We have a few more minutes and just a few more questions that I think that we'd like to address. Someone followed up with a question about my 3-year comment. Don't worry, I contact you to remind you to renew, so you don't need to do that on our website or anything like that. Several companies in the supply chain have indicated that they are already subscribed to similar programs and hence don't see the value of OCS. How do we address this? So the similar programs they listed were ISO certified or merit, etc.
So my response to that would be let's assume they're subscribing to ISO 14001. So if I want to use ISO 14001 language, then and let's think about what is the objective. The objective here is 0 pellet loss. So they would have, as part of their ISO 14001, a commitment to the OCS program, which really would manifest itself as an identification of pellet loss as a key part of their aspect impact analysis, which would drive the management system to address that type of thing. So there are ways to incorporate these principles of 0 pellet loss into an existing management system. And we'd be happy to talk with you if somebody has a specific question. Be happy to talk with them if they'll email me that.
Great. I also see, will this program eventually expand to cover VOC emissions? So our focus is on the things that we've listed, which are plastic, pellets, flakes, and powders, and those sorts of things. VOC emissions are handled by other programs. There was also a question, are ACC or plastic subcommittees specifically focused on improving and progressing the OCS program? Can member companies join these committees to help provide feedback and influence program requirements and resources? I love that question because I probably say 7 times a day that plastic is a member-led, member-driven organization, and as such, and ACC is very similar to that. And so OCS is something that we really value the feedback and participation of our members. So we do have a committee of OCS Blue members, but again, on top of that, we welcome feedback from all of our members and all of our participants on ways to improve and grow the program. If you're interested in participating or getting engaged in those sorts of administrative or functional improvements, please feel free to reach out to me. My email will be in the final email, and you can grab it that way. I have 11:59 on my side, and again, so I want to make sure that we end on time. So that's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank you all for participating, as well as my colleagues for presenting and answering all of these great questions that we've seen. As a reminder, please fill out the survey that you'll be getting shortly to get a copy of the slides and the recording of this webinar in advance of the conclusion of all 3 seminars. And don't forget to register to attend our second in the series, which is on September 14th. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you.